Lieutenant Commander Jake Harrison had spent exactly 93 days on the planet Kth-Moa. That was long enough for him to see the rough beauty of the Vortak homeland. But it was not nearly long enough to understand the complicated rules of their society based on honor. The desert planet had two suns that created dark shadows on the walls of the clan fortress made of sandstone. The Vortak warriors stood in straight lines without making a sound. Even breathing felt too loud in that silence. The rules for watching other cultures said he should not get involved in their local customs. His training materials had stressed these words again and again. But those words felt empty as Jake watched what was happening in the main courtyard of the fortress. The accused person stood in the middle of everyone. Her name was Lisa Keffel, daughter of the clan leader Garen. Her lizard-like face looked calm and dignified even though chains were locked around her wrists. Her scaly skin was deep green, which showed she was from a noble family. The silver marks along her neck meant she was an unmarried daughter who could have children. Elder Throck spoke in the formal way of Vortak justice. He said the charge was willful disobedience of family honor by refusing a good marriage match. The accused chose what she wanted instead of what the clan needed. She put herself above the welfare of everyone else. Jake's translation device gave him extra information that made his stomach feel sick. Lisa had said no to an arranged marriage. That marriage would have made her clan stronger against enemy groups. Under Vortak law, saying no like this was like betraying the family structure that held their whole society together. Elder Throck continued speaking. The punishment is 10 ceremonial strikes to bring back honor by showing proper order. The discipline will be given by family members to prove that clan loyalty is more important than personal choice. Jake watched as Lisa's brothers stepped forward. They did not look happy about it. Fane was the oldest. He carried a ceremonial rod made from ironwood that had been blessed by clan holy men. His lizard face showed no feelings, but Jake could see the tension in his strong body as he got ready to deliver the first strike. Corv was the younger brother. He would deliver strikes 2 through 6 according to their traditions. His green scaly hands held a similar rod very carefully. His training as a soldier was obvious in how he held it. But his eyes showed something Jake had learned to see in all species. It was pain at having to hurt someone he loved. "This is wrong," Jake said quietly under his breath. His words disappeared into the desert wind blowing across the courtyard. The ceremony moved forward with perfect ritual timing. Each moment felt like it would never end. Lisa knelt on the sandstone platform. Her posture stayed dignified even though she was in a weak position. The clan members watching paid close attention. This was both punishment and a lesson. It showed how someone who disobeyed was corrected through family discipline. Jake looked at the faces of the Vortak warriors. He saw different expressions. Some clearly agreed with the traditional response to Lisa's rebellion. Others looked troubled that family members had to give the punishment. Elder Throck announced the first strike. It was for disobeying her father's authority. Fane lifted the ceremonial rod. His movements were smooth even though he clearly did not want to do this. Jake could see the careful precision that would cause maximum pain without causing lasting injury. This discipline was designed to shame and teach rather than permanently harm. But as the rod started coming down toward Lisa's back, Jake found himself moving. His mind had not finished thinking about the decision. His body just moved. "Stop!" he called out. His voice carried across the courtyard with enough power to halt the ceremony. "I claim right of substitution under coalition treaty rules for protection of non-fighters." The silence that followed was so complete that Jake could hear the wind moving through the banner poles of the fortress. Every Vortak I was now looking at him. They watched him with the kind of attention usually saved for immediate dangers or natural disasters. Clan leader Garen stepped forward. His weathered face showed what Jake had learned to recognize as deep surprise mixed with calculation. "Human," he said in accented standard language. "You call upon ancient law that few outsiders know exists. I call upon law that protects beings from punishment they do not deserve," Jake answered. He tried to keep his voice steady despite how huge this moment was. "Your daughter's only crime was choosing freedom over political convenience." "Her crime," Garen corrected with dangerous softness, "was putting personal desire above family honor. Do you understand what you are asking for?" Jake looked at Lisa. Her lizard features now showed shock and something that might have been gratitude. Her brothers still held their ceremonial rods. They were frozen in position as they tried to understand this unexpected intervention. "I understand," Jake said, moving toward the punishment platform. "Strength is measured by willingness to protect others no matter their species or cultural boundaries." Elder Throck looked through ancient texts. His movements suggested he was checking legal precedent rather than refusing the request. "Substitution rights exist in our law," he finally announced. "But tradition requires the substitute to suffer the full measure of punishment meant for the original accused." "I accept those terms," Jake said. He removed his diplomatic jacket and got ready to take Lisa's place on the platform. "You cannot," Lisa protested. Her voice carried sounds that Jake's translator showed as desperate concern. "The discipline is designed for Vortak bodies. Your human body will not survive what mine was meant to endure." Jake met her eyes. He saw intelligence and fierce independence that reminded him why he had stepped in. "Maybe not," he said simply, "but I am going to try." As he knelt on the sandstone platform where Lisa had been positioned, Jake realized he had about 30 seconds to get ready for pain calculated to test the limits of reptilian endurance. His military training had included resistance protocols, but nothing covered taking ceremonial punishment designed for alien bodies. Fane approached with obvious confusion. His ceremonial rod was now meant to strike someone who had volunteered to bear his sister's punishment. "Human," he said quietly. "Why do you do this?" "Because," Jake replied, positioning himself to receive the first blow. "Some things are wrong no matter the tradition, and some people are worth protecting no matter their species." The first strike drove him to his knees with pain that seemed to burn through every nerve in his back. But Jake bit down on the scream that tried to escape. He forced himself back to an upright position. 9 strikes remaining. The second strike came from Corv. It was delivered with precision that Jake was beginning to understand was meant to test mental strength as much as physical endurance. Vortak's ceremonial discipline was not random violence. It was calculated suffering designed to break pride while leaving the person able to learn from their pain. Jake's military training had included resistance protocols for questioning and torture. But nothing had prepared him for the psychological complexity of accepting punishment meant for someone else while that person's brothers were required to deliver it. Each blow carried the weight of family duty and cultural necessity. The physical pain was secondary to the emotional burden everyone was sharing. "Strike 3, Elder Throck announced, "for dishonoring clan alliances." Fane had taken position again. Jake could see the conflict in the warrior's lizard features as he prepared to give pain to someone who had voluntarily accepted his sister's punishment. The ceremonial rod came down with measured force. Jake managed to stay upright by focusing on Lisa's face. Her expression was caught between gratitude and horror at what he was suffering on her behalf. "You should not have done this," she whispered. Her voice carried sounds that Jake's translator could not properly render but somehow showed deep emotional complexity. "Probably not," Jake gasped. He tasted blood where he had bitten his tongue to avoid crying out. "But some things are more important than should or should not." The gathered Vortak were watching this unprecedented display with attention that went beyond simple observation. Jake could sense he was being evaluated, not just for his physical ability to endure the punishment, but for the reason behind his intervention and what it meant culturally for an outsider to accept responsibility for clan discipline. Corv stepped forward for the fourth strike. His movements now showed something that looked almost like respect. "Human," he said quietly, positioning his rod. "Your species possesses honor that we did not expect." The fourth blow nearly sent Jake face first into the sandstone platform, but he managed to catch himself and returned to kneeling position. His back felt like it was on fire. He was beginning to understand why Vortak ceremonial discipline was considered enough punishment for serious clan violations. "Strike 5, Elder Throck continued. His voice carried hints that suggested he was as surprised by Jake's endurance as anyone else present. This time Corv hesitated. He studied Jake with obvious uncertainty. "The human body was not designed for Vortak discipline protocols," he said, speaking to his father rather than Jake directly. "Continuing this punishment may cause permanent damage." Clan leader Garen stepped closer. His weathered features showed calculation mixed with something that might have been concern. "The substitution was accepted under ancient law," he said carefully. "But tradition also requires that punishment serve justice rather than revenge." Jake forced himself to speak despite the pain that made every breath feel like breathing molten metal. "I knew the risks when I claimed substitution rights," he said. His voice was rough but steady. 10 strikes were meant for Lisa. 10 strikes I will take." "But why?" Fane asked. Genuine confusion was clear in his tone. "You barely know our sister. Why accept suffering meant for her?" Jake looked up at the assembled Vortak warriors. He saw faces that showed curiosity, respect, and growing understanding of something they had not expected from a human diplomat. "Because," he said, drawing on diplomatic training and cultural knowledge he had absorbed during his assignment, "honor shared is honor doubled. Suffering borne for others is the mark of true strength." The words were from ancient Vortak military codes. Their use by a human created a moment of deep silence that rippled through the assembled clan members. Jake had quoted philosophy that went to the heart of what Vortak society considered most admirable about warrior behavior. Elder Throck's lizard features showed something approaching amazement. "You know the warrior codes." "I know enough," Jake replied, preparing himself for the fifth strike. "To recognize that true strength protects those who cannot protect themselves." Corv delivered the fifth blow with obvious reluctance. Jake felt his vision blur as pain overloaded his nervous system, but he stayed upright through sheer determination. He refused to collapse while Lisa's brothers were being forced to fulfill duties that his intervention had made personally painful for them. "Strike 6, Elder Throck announced, but his voice now carried different undertones. Respect mixed with something that sounded like approval. The pattern continued through strikes 7 and 8. Fane and Corv took turns delivering them while the assembled clan members watched Jake endure punishment designed to test the limits of reptilian endurance. By the 8th blow, Jake's back was a mass of fire. His hands were shaking from the effort required to stay composed. But something had changed in the atmosphere of the ceremony. What had begun as diplomatic intervention was becoming something else. A demonstration that ideas of honor and sacrifice could cross species barriers. "Strike 9, Elder Throck said, for defiance of proper order." Fane approached for the second to last blow, but his movement now carried different meaning. Instead of reluctant family duty, his posture suggested something approaching ceremony, as if he was participating in something that honored rather than punished. The 9th strike drove Jake to his hands and knees. His vision narrowed as his body reached the limits of what it could endure. But through the pain he could hear whispered conversations among the Vortak warriors. His translator showed them as expressions of amazement and growing respect. "One more," Jake whispered. He forced himself back to kneeling position despite muscles that screamed in protest. "One more and it is finished." Corv stepped forward for the final strike. The ceremonial rod was held with something that looked like reverence rather than duty. "Strike 10, he announced. Then he paused. He studied Jake's battered form with obvious uncertainty. "For showing us," clan leader Garen said quietly, "that strength and honor exist in forms we had not recognized." The final blow was delivered with ceremonial precision. Jake felt consciousness threaten to slip away as pain overloaded every system in his body. But he managed to remain upright until Elder Throck spoke the words that completed the punishment ritual. "Justice is served," the Elder announced. "Honor is restored through suffering willingly accepted." As Jake finally allowed himself to collapse forward onto the sandstone platform, the last thing he saw before unconsciousness claimed him was Lisa's face. Her lizard features displayed emotions that needed no translation. Gratitude, amazement, and something that looked remarkably like the beginning of profound respect. Jake woke up 3 days later in the clan fortress medical facility. His back was wrapped in Vortak healing compounds that felt like ice and fire at the same time. Dr. Elena Morrison was the human medical officer from the Coalition base. She was adjusting his fluids with professional efficiency that could not quite hide her personal concern. "Welcome back to the land of the living," she said, noting his return to consciousness. "Though I have to say, volunteering to take ceremonial punishment designed for reptilian bodies ranks among the more creative ways I have seen humans nearly kill themselves." "Did it work?" Jake asked. His voice was barely above a whisper because of the pain medication affecting his speech. "Depends on what you mean by work," Dr. Morrison replied, checking his vital signs. "Medically speaking, you have got second-degree cuts across 60% of your back. Muscle trauma that will take weeks to heal, and enough pain medication in your system to knock out a bull elephant." "That is not what I meant," Jake said. He tried to shift position and immediately regretted the decision. "Diplomatically speaking," Dr. Morrison continued with a slight smile, "you have created the most significant breakthrough in human-Vortak relations since first contact. The clan leaders have been requesting audiences with you since you collapsed." The medical facility door chimed. Lisa Keffel entered with careful movement that suggested she was uncertain about her welcome. Her lizard features showed a complex mix of emotions that Jake's cultural training helped him interpret as gratitude mixed with deep confusion. "Human Jake," she said, using the formal address that Vortak reserved for respected individuals. "You should not have endured punishment meant for my defiance." "Probably not," Jake agreed, managing a weak smile despite the pain. "But I would do it again if I had to." Lisa's scaled features showed the reptilian version of amazement. "Why? You barely know me. My choices should not have concerned someone of your species." Jake considered the question seriously. He tried to find words that would bridge the cultural gap between human ideas of individual rights and Vortak ideas of family honor. "Because," he said finally, "what you did was not defiance. It was courage. You chose to stand up for your right to determine your own future even knowing the cost. That is something worth protecting regardless of species." "The cost," Lisa said quietly, "was meant to be mine to bear. And now it has been shared," Jake replied. "According to your own traditions, does that not make it less of a burden rather than more?" Before Lisa could respond, the medical facility door chimed again. Fane Keffel entered with purposeful movement that suggested important business. The eldest brother's lizard features were composed in formal dignity. But Jake could see tension in his strong frame that spoke of internal conflict. "Human Jake," Fane said, using the respectful address. "My father requests audience when your health permits. There are matters of honor that require discussion." "What kind of matters?" Jake asked, though he was beginning to suspect that his intervention had created complications beyond simple diplomatic courtesy. "Kark," Lisa said quietly. The word carried sounds that Jake's translator struggled to show properly. "Honor debt that extends beyond individual obligation to include family and clan loyalty." Dr. Morrison looked up from her medical readings. Her expression was that of someone whose cultural briefings had covered theoretical possibilities without expecting practical application. "Honor debt? As in they consider themselves obligated to you because of your sacrifice." "More complex than obligation," Fane corrected. His formal tone suggested he was explaining ideas that did not translate easily. "The human accepted punishment meant for clan member, demonstrating warrior heart and protective spirit. Such actions create bonds that go beyond species barriers." Jake felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in ways that suggested his impulsive intervention had created connections he had not expected. "Bonds like what?" "Like the recognition that courage and sacrifice speak universal languages," said a new voice as Corv Keffel entered the medical facility. The younger brother's lizard features showed a complex mix of respect and determination. "And that warriors worthy of following come in many forms." Dr. Morrison checked her cultural database with rapid searches that suggested she was trying to understand implications that went beyond standard diplomatic protocols. "According to Vortak tradition," she said carefully, "accepting punishment meant for a family member creates recognition of warrior status, regardless of species origin." "Warrior status?" Jake asked, though he was beginning to understand that his 3 days of unconsciousness had allowed time for the clan to process the implications of his actions. "The willingness to suffer for others," Corv explained, "is the fundamental quality that defines true strength in Vortak culture. Your intervention demonstrated that human consciousness can understand ideas we thought were beyond outsider understanding." Lisa moved closer to Jake's medical bed. Her movements now showed the kind of confidence that suggested her ordeal had resolved into something approaching empowerment. "My brothers have been processing the implications of being prevented from fulfilling family duty by someone whose courage they were forced to acknowledge." "Processing how?" Jake asked, though something in Fane and Corv's posture suggested the answer would involve complications that extended beyond simple gratitude. "By recognizing," Fane said formally, "that the human who accepted our sister's punishment possesses warrior qualities that deserve acknowledgement according to our most sacred traditions." Dr. Morrison's medical scanner began showing elevated stress readings that suggested Jake's conversation was triggering physical responses that went beyond his injuries. "Jake," she said carefully, "I think you need to understand that you have positioned yourself at the center of cultural dynamics that could reshape human Vortak military cooperation." "How so?" Jake asked, though he was beginning to suspect that his impulsive decision to protect Lisa had triggered consequences that would extend far beyond one family's internal politics. "Because," Corv said with formal precision that suggested a prepared statement, "warriors who demonstrate true strength earn the loyalty of those who witness their courage. And loyalty once earned through sacrifice creates bonds that extend beyond individual recognition to include shared purpose." Jake looked between the 3 Vortak siblings. He noted expressions that ranged from gratitude to respect to something that looked remarkably like determination to honor obligations that his intervention had created. "What exactly are you saying?" he asked. "We are saying," Fane replied with formal dignity, "that tomorrow, when your health permits, there will be ceremony to acknowledge what your sacrifice has accomplished, and decisions made about how honor debt is properly acknowledged when it involves beings who prove that warrior heart goes beyond species barriers." As the 3 siblings left the medical facility, Jake realized that his attempt to protect one person from unjust punishment had created ripples that were spreading through Vortex society in ways that neither he nor his diplomatic training had expected. "Dr. Morrison," he said quietly, "I think I am going to need a lot more cultural briefing before tomorrow." The honor ceremony took place at dawn in the Fortress Ceremonial Amphitheater. Representatives from multiple Vortac clans gathered to witness something that had no precedent in their recorded history. Jake stood in the center of the ancient stone circle. His back was still bandaged, but his posture was as straight as pain medication and stubborn determination could make it. Clan leader Garen presided over the ceremony with formal dignity that suggested he understood the historical significance of what was taking place. "We gather," he announced in the traditional rhythm, "to acknowledge actions that go beyond normal understanding of courage and sacrifice." Jake found himself studying the assembled Vortac warriors. He noted expressions that ranged from curiosity to skepticism to something that looked like growing respect. Word of his intervention had spread through the clan networks. The ceremony was attracting attention from leaders who wanted to evaluate the implications for themselves. "The human Jake Harrison," Garen continued, "accepted punishment meant for clan daughter, demonstrating qualities that our ancestors would recognize as warrior heart, regardless of species origin." Elder Throck stepped forward with scrolls that contained ancient protocols for recognizing combat valor and protective sacrifice. "Traditional law requires testing of those who claim warrior status through deeds rather than birth," he announced. "The human has demonstrated willingness to suffer for others. Now he must prove that such sacrifice stems from understanding rather than impulse." Jake felt his stomach clench as he realized the ceremony would involve more than symbolic recognition. The Vortac were going to test whether his intervention had been motivated by genuine appreciation for their values or simple emotional reaction to perceived injustice. "The first test," Elder Throck continued, "is knowledge of warrior codes. Speak the principles that guide protective behavior." Jake drew on his cultural studies and military training. He hoped that his preparation for diplomatic assignment had covered the philosophical foundations he was being asked to demonstrate. "Strength serves those who cannot protect themselves," he said in formal Vortac. "Honor shared between warriors creates bonds stronger than individual courage. Sacrifice made for others proves worthiness to lead those who would follow." The assembled clan members showed visible surprise at hearing ancient military philosophy spoken by a human in their own language. Murmurs rippled through the amphitheater as they processed the implications of outsider knowledge of their most sacred principles. "The second test," Elder Throck announced, "is demonstration of tactical understanding. Prove that warrior heart includes wisdom to match courage." What followed was an intensive examination of military strategy and combat theory that tested Jake's ability to think like a Vortac warrior while maintaining his human perspective on tactical flexibility. The questions ranged from theoretical scenarios to practical applications of leadership principles that govern Vortac military units. Jake found himself drawing on experiences from his coalition military service. He translated human tactical ideas into Vortac strategic frameworks while demonstrating that courage informed by intelligence was more valuable than simple willingness to fight. "The final test," Elder Throck said, his voice carrying undertones that suggested this was the most important evaluation, "is combat trial against chosen champions. Prove that protective instincts can translate to warrior capability." Jake's heart sank as he realized he was going to have to fight Vortac opponents whose physical capabilities far exceeded human norms. His back was still healing from the ceremonial punishment. His species' limitations would be obvious to anyone observing the trials. But as Fane and Corv stepped forward as his designated opponents, Jake saw something in their lizard features that suggested the combat trial was about more than simple physical prowess. "Brother warriors," Fane said formally, "we fight not to defeat but to evaluate. show us the tactical mind that chose sacrifice over safety. The combat trial that followed was unlike anything Jake had experienced in his military training. Instead of trying to match Vortak's physical advantages, he found himself using human tactical flexibility and strategic thinking to counter opponents who were stronger and faster, but whose fighting styles were more predictable. Fane attacked with coordinated precision that Jake expected from Vortak's military training. But Jake's human ability to adapt tactics in real time allowed him to counter moves that would have overwhelmed most opponents. Instead of trying to overpower his opponent, Jake used leverage and timing to neutralize advantages that seemed impossible to overcome. Corv presented different challenges. He fought with aggressive intensity that tested Jake's ability to maintain defensive positioning while looking for tactical opportunities. But again, Jake's human unpredictability allowed him to respond to attacks in ways that surprised his opponent and created openings for counteraction. The combat trials were not about victory, Jake realized. The Vortak were evaluating his approach to conflict rather than his ability to win. They wanted to see whether his protective instincts could translate to tactical leadership that other warriors would respect and follow. When the trials concluded, Jake was exhausted but still standing. He had demonstrated that human tactical thinking could complement Vortak combat prowess in ways that created mutual advantage rather than competitive conflict. Elder Throck consulted with the clan leaders before announcing the ceremony's conclusion. The human Jake Harrison has demonstrated knowledge of warrior principles, tactical understanding worthy of respect, and combat capability that honors protective sacrifice. But it was what happened next that surprised everyone present, including Jake himself. Fane and Corv stepped forward together. Their movements were coordinated with precision that suggested planned ceremony. Before the assembled clan members, they knelt on the ancient stone platform. It was the traditional gesture of loyalty to a warrior leader whose courage and wisdom had earned their respect. "We acknowledge warrior brother," Fane said formally, "whose strength protects those who cannot protect themselves. We pledge loyalty earned through sacrifice," Corv added, "and commitment proven through willingness to suffer for others." The amphitheater fell silent as the assembled Vortak processed the implications of what they were witnessing. Two of the clan's most respected young warriors were publicly acknowledging a human as worthy of their loyalty. Something that had never happened in recorded Vortak history. Clan leader Garen stepped forward. His weathered features showed a complex mix of pride in his sons and uncertainty about the precedent they were establishing. "Rise, warriors all," he said formally. "What has been acknowledged here today creates bonds that extend beyond individual recognition." Fane and Corv stood. Jake realized that their gesture had transformed him from diplomatic observer to something he had never expected. A bridge between species whose military traditions had found common ground in ideas of sacrifice and protective duty. "The ceremony is complete," Elder Throck announced, "but its implications will require careful consideration by all clan leaders present." Jake found himself surrounded by Vortak warriors whose expressions ranged from respect to curiosity to something that looked like the beginning of profound cultural shift. His intervention to protect Lisa had created ripples that were spreading through their society in ways that could reshape human Vortak military cooperation. "Brother warrior Jake," Fane said quietly, using an address that carried weight beyond simple respect, "there are matters we must discuss regarding how loyalty earned through sacrifice translates to practical alliance." Jake looked at these remarkable beings whose culture had found ways to honor courage regardless of its species' origin. He realized that his impulsive decision to protect one person had opened possibilities for cooperation that previous generations had never imagined. "What kind of practical alliance?" he asked. "The kind," Corv replied with determination that matched his brother's, "that proves warrior heart can create bonds stronger than species barriers when it serves purposes greater than individual advancement." 6 months after the honor ceremony, Lieutenant Commander Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the coalition vessel Unity. He watched his integrated human Vortak tactical unit coordinate a rescue operation with seamless efficiency that had become their trademark. Fane and Corv Keffel moved through the ship's corridors with their human teammates. Their reptilian strength and honor-based loyalty combined with human tactical flexibility to create capabilities that neither species could achieve alone. Target vessel is showing signs of structural failure, reported Sergeant Martinez, the unit's human communication specialist. Estimated 12 minutes before life support systems fail completely. Acknowledged, Jake replied. Then he switched to the formal Vortak address that had become natural after months of integrated command. Brother warriors, prepare for emergency boarding action. The rescue operation that followed demonstrated everything Jake had hoped their alliance could accomplish. Fane's squad used Vortak physical capabilities to breach the damaged hull. Corv's team provided security that combined reptilian combat prowess with human tactical innovation. Their coordination was flawless, not because they had eliminated their differences, but because they had learned to make those differences complement each other. Civilians secured, Fane reported. His voice carried the calm professionalism that had made him Jake's most trusted field commander. The human tactical approach to emergency extraction proved superior to traditional Vortak methods. And Vortak's strength capabilities made the extraction possible in the first place, Jake replied, watching the rescued civilians being transferred to the Unity's medical bay. Combined effectiveness, brother warrior. Dr. Elena Morrison had been transferred to the Unity to serve as medical officer for the integrated unit. She monitored the rescue operation with professional satisfaction that came from seeing theoretical cooperation translated into practical results. The psychological evaluations continue to show remarkable adaptation, she told Jake during their post-mission debriefing. Both human and Vortak team members report higher unit cohesion and mission effectiveness than comparable single-species units. Because they are not trying to be the same, Jake observed, reviewing tactical reports that showed how his unit's success rate exceeded predictions for both human and Vortak military capabilities. They are trying to be better together than either could be separately. The success of Jake's integrated unit had attracted attention from coalition military leadership. This led to requests for expansion of the program and development of similar cross-species cooperation protocols. But Jake had insisted on maintaining small unit size and selective recruitment. He recognized that the bonds created through shared sacrifice could not be mass-produced through administrative directive. Commander Harrison, came a familiar voice as Lisa Keffel entered the briefing room. Her diplomatic credentials now marked her as the Coalition's first Vortak human cultural liaison. Specialist. The Council requests update on integration protocols for presentation to species representatives. Lisa's transformation from reluctant clan daughter to advocate for cross-species cooperation had been as remarkable as the military success of Jake's unit. Her experience with human intervention in Vortak cultural practices had given her unique insights into how different species could honor each other's values while working toward shared goals. The protocols work, Jake said simply, because they are built on recognition that different species bring different strengths to common challenges. We do not try to make humans fight like Vortak or Vortak think like humans. We try to create situations where both approaches complement each other. And the loyalty bonds? Lisa asked, noting the way Fane and Corv interacted with their human teammates with respect that went beyond simple professional courtesy. The loyalty bonds, Corv said, entering the briefing room with confident bearing that had developed since joining Jake's unit, exist because we prove that courage and sacrifice speak universal languages. Fane followed his brother, carrying reports that detailed their unit's latest mission success. The human concept of tactical flexibility combined with Vortak honor Based commitment creates advantages that neither species recognized before cooperation. Jake studied these remarkable beings who had become his closest allies and friends. He remembered the moment when he decided to accept punishment meant for Lisa without understanding the cultural implications of his choice. That impulsive intervention had created bonds that went beyond species barriers and proved that individual acts of conscience could reshape entire civilizations' approaches to cooperation. "Any regrets?" Dr. Morrison asked, noting the way Jake's integrated unit had become a model for cross-species military cooperation throughout the coalition. Jake considered the question while watching Fane and Corv coordinate with their human teammates on preparations for their next mission. His back still carried scars from the ceremonial punishment he had accepted, but those marks had become symbols of something more important than personal sacrifice. Proof that courage could create connections between different forms of consciousness. "Just one," he said finally. "What is that?" "I regret that it took seeing injustice to make me realize that true strength is not about protecting your own people," Jake said. His enhanced cultural understanding now allowed him to appreciate the full complexity of what his intervention had accomplished. It is about protecting anyone who needs protection regardless of species or cultural boundaries. Lisa's lizard features showed the kind of satisfaction that came from seeing personal transformation become universal principle. "In that case," she said, "I am grateful for humans who understand that courage and justice go beyond the boundaries between worlds." Around them, the Unity continued its patrol through sectors where human-Vortac cooperation was becoming the foundation for new approaches to galactic security and diplomacy. Jake's decision to accept 10 ceremonial strikes had created ripples that were still spreading through coalition space. It proved that individual acts of sacrifice could indeed reshape how entire civilizations approached the challenges of living together among the stars. The scars on his back served as permanent reminders that true honor came not from following tradition blindly, but from recognizing when tradition needed to evolve to accommodate new understanding of what strength and courage could accomplish when they went beyond species barriers. And every time Fane and Corv addressed him as brother warrior, Jake was reminded that the most profound loyalties were those earned through willingness to suffer for others, regardless of where they came from or what they looked like. In the end, 10 strikes meant for one person had become the foundation for alliances that proved cooperation could accomplish what competition never could. The creation of bonds strong enough to protect anyone who needed protection anywhere in the galaxy.